Thanks for joining us, and today we're going to talk about how Yogananda changed Kriya Yoga. So Yogananda, the Swami Yogananda, sometimes called Paramahansa Yogananda, was an Indian sage, an Indian yogi, a monk from India who came to the United States in 1920 and started teaching Kriya Yoga to American students and students around the world, in fact. And he learned Kriya Yoga from Sri Yukteswar, who was also a student of Lahiri Baba, Lahiri Mahashai, who is considered sort of the father of the Kriya Yoga. And when Yogananda came to the United States, he ended up making some modifications to Kriya. And likely it was because the students, the American students, found the particular version of Kriya that he was teaching to be too confusing or challenging. And if you have studied Kriya Yoga, you know that it takes a little bit of work to get the practices right. And the practices that we teach at Modern Kriya, our website modernkriya.com, come from the Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage of Kriya Yoga. So that was one of Lahiri Baba's preeminent disciples, was Panchanan Bhattacharya. And so it could be considered as one of the original versions of Kriya Yoga. And you know, Kriya Yoga has branched out because there were many students that Lahiri had, and they had many students, and so on and so on. But the lineage that Yogananda taught came from Sri Yukteswar. And because Yogananda changed it, it really ended up affecting the way that Kriya works. And you know, I think that he was really trying to help students by making these modifications, but it ended up not being as effective as Kriya in its original form is. And, you know, no fault to Yogananda for that. I mean, I think he was trying to address the needs of the time. But consequently, what we have now that Yogananda has gone, you know, and he's not here to explain what he did or why he did it, but now people are left with a version of Kriya in Self-Realization Fellowship or Yogoda Satsang Society. They're left with a version of Kriya that's not the most effective, and they haven't been told why. And they look at it as sort of like the gospel, right? Like, if you don't do Kriya this way, you're going against the guru. And that is a very challenging situation to be in as a student. You're trying to use Kriya Yoga to get into an internalized state, what we call pratyahara, but you're told, you know, by the orthodoxy of SRF YSS, that if you make any modifications to the Kriya or question the Kriya, you're going against the guru. This is terrible guilt, and that you would put on a student, which I think is ridiculous. But anyway, Yogananda changed Kriya in a few ways, and I'm going to tell you what they were. So first off was that Yogananda did not teach Navi Kriya. And this is unfortunate. Navi Kriya has to do with the area in the lower abdominal area. And the thing about that is, if you bypass that area and just try to go straight into Kriya Pranayama, you're missing something that, you know, would be better. Your practice would be more effective if you do Navi Kriya. So, you know, I would say definitely that is something that is missing from that path, is the Navi Kriya. It's not a very complicated technique, but Lahiri recognized that the energy in the navel area is really important, and you need to connect with it, right? So Navi Kriya is definitely something that's missing. Now, the other thing that Yogananda did is that he started teaching Kriya by breathing through your mouth, right? And I think it was because there were a few practices that he likely tried to teach that people in the West were like, what is this, right? One of them is Ujjayi Mudra, which is basically taking your tongue and putting it into the nasal pharynx. That is usually done in Kriya Yoga, and it's combined with breathing through your nose, right? So when you're doing your Kriya Pranayama, the Kriya breath, you breathe through your nose and you put your tongue in Ujjayi Mudra. Well, Yogananda, I think, tried to teach Ujjayi Mudra because there's sort of a Ujjayi Mudra light version in his SRF lessons, but it's not Khechari Mudra. It's a very weak version of it that it doesn't really do anything at all. So likely people had challenges learning it, and so Yogananda thought, okay, if they can't do Khechari Mudra and breathe through their nose like I do, because he did Khechari Mudra, then I'm going to have to teach them to do Kriya Pranayama in another way. So he created the mouth breathing Pranayama. And he added a version of the Ujjayi breath, which is basically a gentle contraction of your epiglottis, and it creates this sort of windy sound in your throat, right? So it's used in yoga, Ujjayi breath, right? What they call sort of ocean breath. And so he created that, and then he also added the idea of a tube, right? The tube being this tube that began from the base of your spine, comes up your spine, and then ended at the point between the eyebrows as a way to get them to focus along this spinal path, combined with the feeling of moving the prana, or life force, through there, and the mouth breathing. Now, this is so much more complicated than Kriya Pranayama as it is traditionally taught, or the original versions that Lahiri taught, right? And it adds this challenge for the student into it of making this very unnatural sound. Like the sound in Kriya Yoga, as taught by SRF, it sounds kind of like a vacuum cleaner to some degree, especially if people start to get loud in it. And I've been in many meditations, in SRF organized meditations, where they're like, please do your Kriyas silently, because people are going, like they're sounding like Darth Vader, right? Or like a vacuum cleaner. And that is not what Kriya sounds like when you do it in Khechari Mudra through your nose, right? You hardly hear any sound at all. You're still involving some kind of Ujjayi breath in there, but it's going through your nose, and it's very quiet, and it's very gentle. And so by Yogananda changing Kriya to be mouth Kriya, making the focus on this inner tube, and then making this very strong aspirated sound, it really creates a lot of tension in the Kriya Yoga practitioner. And I've spoken to many people, who learn the SRF Kriya, and they're like, it makes me really stressed out. It's very strenuous. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing it like really, like you learn to do it like way too strenuously. And it creates a stress in your body, and it ends up stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. Now, if you know anything about the stuff I've said and what Forrest Knudsen has said about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, Kriya Yoga and heart rate variability resonance breathing, which is a derivative of Kriya Yoga, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake in your body for your nervous system. It slows you down. It gets you into a low idle, right? So you want to do Kriya Pranayama in a way that is going to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and bring you into an internalized state, what we call pratyahara, right? That's what you're trying to do. Now, if you do a mouth breathing Kriya Pranayama that includes the tube and all this tension in your throat from a very strenuous Ujjayi breath, you're going to end up likely stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of what you want. And no wonder it takes people who do SRF Kriya so many Kriya to get into Pratyahara. It's because they're doing their Kriya in that way, right? Now, that isn't to say that there aren't some folks who have learned the SRF YSS Kriya that have been able to kind of relax in it and do something very gentle, and then they get into Pratyahara. Certainly that is possible, but the technique itself is not really designed for that, the way that Yogananda taught it, at least in the West. So there's that. Now, the other thing that Yogananda did with Kriya is he removed the Om Joppa, right? So the Om Joppa is the sort of tuning into the different spinal centers, the chakras, and mentally chanting Om within them. Now, what Lahiri Baba said originally about this is that if you do Kriya Yoga without Om Joppa, it's tamasic, sort of a negative, right? And so the thing is that Yogananda totally stripped that out. So when you're doing Kriya Pranayama, Lahiri said you also do the Om Japa at the same time. And that's not in the SRF YSS Kriya. However, it may have been taught by Yogananda. It seems like it may have been taught early on, but it was removed from the lessons by SRF editors later, right? And so it is, in the revised lessons for SRF, a appendix, a supplemental lesson for Kriya, and it talks about Kriya Yoga with Om Japa. Well, that's the way that Kriya was originally taught, was with Om Japa, and Lahiri Baba has said in his Garland of Letters, in one of his letters to his disciples, make sure you do it with the Om Japa. So definitely that's what you want to do, right? So if you're an SRF student of Kriya, go check out those supplemental lessons that have the Kriya Yoga, Pranayama, with the Om Japa, and do it, right? It will really be a boon to your practice. You'll be doing it closer to what Lahiri intended. And especially if you stop doing the mouth breathing pranayama and you breathe through your nose, and if you're able to do Ujjayi Mudra, or at least place the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, you will be getting a lot of the benefits that you would as if you learned, you know, the more original Kriya. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about is Shambhavi Mudra. So Shambhavi Mudra is basically, you know, what people often think of looking up at the third eye, the spiritual eye, right? Bringing the attention there. And for Yogananda, he was talked about sort of the kutastha area, what they say, the point between the eyebrows, and the medulla as being sort of two polar opposites of the ajna or agnya chakra, right? And so what he said is that you would basically, in all the meditations, Hong Sa included, the Om technique of meditation, which they teach in SRF, this focus on the point between the eyebrows, the kutastha, and looking up at it, right? As if you're peering through a tube, and then you want to see this spiritual eye, and then you want to pierce through the spiritual eye and go into, you know, the void of Satchitananda, right? Into this bliss, right? So that's kind of what they talk about in SRF. But the thing is that the way that the Shambhavi Mudra, what is taught in SRF, of just trying to put the attention at the point between the eyebrows, right, and then raise the eyes, like you learn to do that early on, and it puts a lot of stress on your eyes. And I've talked to people who have, you know, have experienced like headaches and that kind of thing by having this kind of very sort of static, you know, Shambhavi Mudra that is very tense, right? They're trying to draw attention here. And again, anytime you're trying to draw attention and tense an external part of your body, like the surface of your body, you're engaging your sympathetic nervous system. So you don't want to do that. And the Shambhavi Mudra that we teach on our channel and at Modern Kriya is very relaxed, right? You can raise your eyes up slightly. Now your eyes are normally going to be closed, right? But you can raise them up slightly, not to strain and try and look here, but you just raise your eyes up slightly, and you want to engage your peripheral vision. Because when you do that, you're stimulating the right hippocampus of the brain, and the right hippocampus of the brain specializes in spatial awareness, right? So in meditation, you're shifting from the sort of symbol-based, language-based perceptions and classification, categorization, order, all that stuff. You're trying to get away from that. You're shifting from that left brain into the right brain, which has spatial awareness. It doesn't have symbols. It is just open to perceiving, right? That's a kind of meditative process. So when you're focusing externally at the point between the eyebrows and straining, you're stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, which is not what you want. But when you look up gently, right, and you engage your peripheral vision, you're opening yourself up to an expansion of consciousness, right? So the way that they teach, you know, the SRF Kriya and Yogananda taught with the Shambhavi Mudra as being this very tense kind of, you know, technique. You want to move away from that. The very simple raise your eyes, engage your peripheral vision, close your eyes, maintain that spatial awareness and openness all the way through your practice. You don't have to strain then. And if your eyes drop down while you're doing your Kriya Pranayama, right? So if your awareness is in the lower centers and your eyes drop down, that is totally fine. You don't have to be like riveted, like here constantly, and then the eyes up and being this straining posture. It's not gonna help you. So once you start to do your Kriya Pranayama, right, you get an internalization. You start to get the freeze response, the galvanic skin response, and you start to get internalized into pratyahara, right? And and then you start to, get into this low idle state, and you finish up your Kriya Pranayama, and maybe you do Ujjayi Mudra, or what they also call Jyoti Mudra in SRF Kriya, right? And then you're just sitting there in stillness, right? And you start to get a shallowing of the breath, right? That happens naturally. And that is the tranquil breath, which is emerging. And you get very still inside. You start to lose awareness of your body, right? And your eyes are in Shambhavi Mudra, but you're not straining, and you have this openness, this peripheral vision, this 360-degree view around you, right, in your inner sphere. You will get then into a very still state, and you may go into a void, kind of a void state, like it's darkness or whatever, right, which is called dharana, this sort of concentration. And as you get, as your meditation starts to unfold and you become absorbed in things that appear in your meditation, like things that come up, feelings, right? It might be feelings of love, feelings of peace, whatever it is, you become absorbed in it. You're shifting into dhyana, right? Which is true meditation, right? And as that gets deeper and deeper, you will move into samadhi. So that's what you want, right? That's the natural transition. So if you've learned Kriya, the SRF Kriya, we do offer the, the version that was taught by Lahiri Baba to Panchanan Bhattacharya at our website, modernkriya.com. So you can sign up to become a student and learn that Kriya, right? So kind of if you want to relearn the Kriya the way that it was originally taught, then you can, sign up and become a student. It's that simple. If you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.